Well, hello and welcome to another edition of Active Living. We got my good friend Jim Roback, the world traveler, here again today. Jim's been traveling around the world, and I think he's probably gone to where civilization almost began, right?
That's
close
correct.
to it.
That's correct.
Tell us about your trip, Jim.
Okay, well, let's start off with the trip. We leave from Detroit to go to New York because we had to fly Egypt Air. We couldn't fly from Detroit, so we had to go Egypt Air. So we got there, and it's 10 and a half hour flight to Cairo, which is not too bad. Coming back is a little bit longer, like 11 hours and 40 minutes. So it was a great trip. We got there like on Wednesday, and the thing we met with our tour guide, which is a phenomenal guy by the name of Abu. Very intelligent, very knowledgeable, informative, and we learned a lot from him. He was in his process of getting his master's degree in Egyptology.
Really?
So that was phenomenal. You know, so informative, so knowledgeable. It was incredible.
So how many people did you have on this trip,
This
Jim?
was quite a few. We had two groups. We had 39 in our group, which was almost too large. Yeah, but it went very well. Nobody was late, so it went very well with the whole group. They did a good job of keeping up, and so we did quite well.
Great.
And yeah, it was very good. So the next day we started off and going to the pyramids. It's about 10 miles out of Cairo. So right now you cannot see the pyramids from downtown Cairo because of the buildings and everything else that's going on today.
Right.
So you have to take a bus out there. It's the only way we can get there by bus or taxi and such. So we have our bus to take us out there. And you had the three pyramids, the three major pyramids. It was Khufu, Khafre, and Menkaure. And they're really known as Cheops, Chepirin, and Menkaure. They're about 146 meters high, the first two. And
How much is that in feet?
It's about times three, about almost 500 feet.
About 500 feet.
Yes.
So they're pretty good size.
Pretty good size. They're worn down now to 137, the two highest pyramids. And they were built for the pharaoh Khufu, or which is Cheops, one of the same person. And besides those three, there are three additional smaller pyramids very close to it. And so we had the opportunity to go up into Cheops, up the whole elevator. We went to about a little better than halfway up inside the pyramid. There's a hole inside the mountain where you go up and you just continue straight up there. And it was a long climb up just to see a sarcophagus up there. That's all there was.
Okay.
So it wasn't too bad, but it was nice to go inside the pyramid. And it wasn't cold or anything like that. It was very nice. From there, we went to...
Did they tell you at all how they built these pyramids?
Well, it goes back to Saqqara. I'll talk about it there because that's where the design was actually started to build these pyramids.
Okay.
They built them on what they call a step pyramid and went from there. Then we went to what they call the Great Sphinx, and actually this is the head of a human body and the body of a lion. And it measures 73 meters long and 20 meters high. So times 3 is typically what you would go. So
yeah, right.
Basically that's what you have. And they're about 350 meters from Cheops. So he was guarding Cheops, the main temple there for the pharaoh. And it was better known as Bul El Nhol, which means the father of terror. So I'm not keep everybody else away, I guess. But unfortunately, too many grave robbers came in and stole a lot of stuff out of these pyramids, unfortunately. So, and this is where they moved the bodies now to the Valley of the Kings, which we'll talk about later. Unfortunately, the Sphinx was defaced a little bit because one of the pharaohs, I guess he decided to use it as a target practice. So some of the face has been just knocked off. Yeah,
really?
And then the wind and erosion certainly caused a lot of problems also. So the next day went to Saqqara, which is the necropolis of Saqqara. And the thing in necropolis means it's more of a grave, a cemetery where all these kings and that are laid out.
Right.
So this is what this necropolis means, basically. And this particular one was built for the god Sokar, and he was a pharaoh who founded the third dynasty and the pyramids of the Mastaba, which is kind of what they call a bench type of a pyramid. So this first design was actually done in steps, and there was 6 high, and they built this, and what they did is built a step and then they continued to fill it in to make the pyramid. So the design was done here. The first designs of the pyramid were done here.
So the inside the pyramids are solid.
Yeah, and
they're not hollow or anything like that.
Well, Cheops is going up the center of it. So I guess as they made them larger, I guess it opened it up. But the first ones were smaller, basically.
Okay.
So they were about maybe 1/6 the size. So I guess they were able to master the burial chambers inside the pyramids there.
Okay.
So this was done by the architect who was Imhotep, which I pronounce these names in Arabic. It's going to be pretty tough, so we'll have to do the best we can. He was a high priest who did this. The unique thing about this, they have this particular area here where they have these 42 chambers. And we'll talk about the the cycle of death. And this is interesting here to talk about how that is done. And there's 42 chambers, and we'll talk about that in the scales of how one passed away, what happened. So we'll talk about a little bit later on in regards to what that means as far as how you get to heaven, suppose, or afterlife. From there, we went to Memphis, which is the old city, the old capital of Egypt, and then went to degeneration because Alexandria in Egypt became the place to go to. So it kind of went downhill. The unique thing about Memphis was that the statue of Ramses II is there. It's basically about 13 meters long, a little over 40 feet long. It's lying flat. It's got part of a broken leg, and the best one is at the Cairo Museum, which will be there when they open it up in about 4 or 5 years. So I'll build a new museum because the one is way too small. It was so crowded we went there. It was very difficult to see a lot of things. So Memphis had a lot of ruins there, but like I say, had a Sphinx there, which was similar to the one in the pyramids area there. And so much to see there, a lot of broken areas there as far as the statues and things of that nature. After that, we went to a carpet place we saw. It was called a carpet college. They're teaching kids that are 9, 10 years old how to do carpet. And this one kid about 10, he was so fast I couldn't believe it. I mean, the kid was so good. He kept looking at us, smiling, and doing his thing. His fingers were moving faster than you can imagine. It was unbelievable. So it was interesting. So
do they use those same things that we do over here to make rugs, which has
no,
a big
what he was doing, he's just taking the threads and putting them in there, and he was using his fingers mainly, because a lot of times I saw another place they were using their fingers all the time. It was very interesting how they did it.
So it wasn't like a shuttle that went through?
No shuttle. They would just put them in there. I don't know how they did it, but with their fingers was just phenomenal how they did it. So after the next day, went to the actual museum, the museum in Egypt, in Cairo there. And the main thing there was to see King Tut's stuff there, his headdress, I mean the golden head that he had there. Yep. And that was there. You couldn't take any pictures. If you took a picture, they were there to say, delete it. And so you couldn't take no pictures in that particular room. So we saw a lot of his jewelry and things of that nature. And his 2 parts of his coffin were there. They were made out of basically sycamore wood, and the first one and the second one. And they laid in the body, then the first one goes in the second one into the third. The third one is the main one, is actually covered in gold, and it actually was over 300 kilos. And when I came out to it, so it's worth today about $16 million, that gold that's on that particular tomb of his. So it's amazing. So, and then we saw the Rosetta Stone, which is very interesting. Basically this is where the 2 fellows from, one from France was Francois Champollion. He did by scientific method, and Thomas Young out of England, he did by instinct what all these symbols and objects meant, and they were able to decipher the Rosetta Stone, which gave us all the writings that were deciphered from what was done way back 5,000 years ago. So it's pretty neat there. And there was one guy there they called by name of Cappard. It's a wooden statue, and it was made out of, I can't remember what it was, sycamore wood. His eyes were made out of quartz, and then his eyebrows were made out of copper. He looked so real. He looked right at you. I thought he was real, basically. It was real, And then we saw 2 areas of the museum where all of the bodies of Ramses, a lot of them were there. The mummies were there. They're all open to see their faces, and they had a lot of them in there. So interesting to see all that.
Now, what's a Ramses? Is that like a king, or?
Oh yeah, there was Ramses. There's Ramses the 2nd, 3rd, 4th, 5th, 6th. I mean, if you look at the dynasties here, it goes back here. So if you hear Ramses, there's about it goes all the way to the 11th here, basically. So there was 11 of them.
I gotcha.
The Ramses. So there was quite a few of them. And all these symbols, these hieroglyphics, are basically. There was almost 700 signs. They're mostly sacred. They were sound or objects. So that's where all the hieroglyphics are, basically. So one of the things that I was trying to remember here was that, the cartouches. These cartouches that are on a lot of these kings and queens there, it's like this is a cartouche. It has to be completely encircled. It would give the name of the king or the queen. So if it was not in here, you weren't a king or a queen. You were just a dignitary. So yeah, that was pretty good. Now, talking about afterlife, I mean, this is kind of interesting when we go back to Saqqara, that they had these 42 chambers. What a person would, once he passed away, the deceased person was let in, and then these person would ask these people questions if they stole, if they did this or that, and if they lied, they would, because actually what they did when they
did this with their dead body now.
Yeah, well, kind of, they let them into this chamber, supposedly. Okay, symbolic, okay. So they would ask him all these questions, and if they took his heart,
Who did they ask? The dead body?
Well, it's symbolic, you know. I mean, I don't know what it is. I mean,
all
his
right.
spirit, I guess, maybe. I
Okay,
guess.
I'm with you.
So, yeah, they would ask him questions, and if he had more right, they would put his heart on the scale. Now, the other side of the scale was a feather. If the scale went down the heart, well, he wasn't going. He was going to be eaten by Yum Yum over here. He was a bad guy. So if you were lied, you were eaten, and you were going the other way.
Okay.
If you passed all the testing, you passed into the room where Osiris and Isis is. So you passed into the afterworld there. So that you were led into there. So with horror, which is So it was pretty interesting. It's a whole thing on the bottom of this thing here that shows. Hold this thing. Oh, I'm sorry. It's over here. This whole chamber, how it was done there, was very interesting. That this is how they basically decided if you were going to go to heaven, I guess.
But you had to pass these tests to go from one chamber to the next.
Yeah, if your heart didn't pass, then you were going. Yum Yum would eat you up, or they called it, but they called it Yum Yum is a better way of doing it.
Okay.
The mummification was kind of interesting, and the mummification of a body was when they passed away, they would go in. The first thing is take your brain out. They would take an instrument, took it through your nose, and pull your brain through your nostrils.
Oh, jeez.
Yeah, and that's what it was done, you know. So, wow. And then they would take all the cavity, your liver, your intestines, your stomach, and all that, and that was all taken out. And when they did that, they made an incision inside the body and filled it up with the bitumen and all that stuff there. And so that was kind of interesting. And then what they would do is take the body and dip it into a sodium sulfate for 70 days. You know, take all the muscles of the body and shrink it, and all be black, and then and all we'd have is the skin on the bone. That was it. And then if you had a haircut, the only ones who had the haircut were the men, not the women. The women were left with their full hairdress. And after they did the 70 days, then they're mummified. They wrapped all the stuff around them, and then that was the mummy. Then they laid in the coffin. You know, they had a whole section there of how they mummified the bodies. It was quite a long process there. And so that was kind of interesting, and you can see their face. They
pulled the
brain right through the nostrils. They had some kind of a hook or something like that and pulled it right through. I don't know how they did it. I don't know if they opened it up or what.
Okay.
I'm just not sure. So whatever it was. So it was pretty interesting. So after that, the next day we went to what they call Luxor and Karnak. And Karnak was a most fabulous place with the colonnades, these pylons. I mean, what they did there was incredible, and all the reliefs and the paintings on there. There was 134 these columns, and they're probably 8 or 10 feet in diameter.
Right.
Unbelievable, and the height of them is just incredible. And as you went up down the boulevard, they had all these sphinxes. They were lined up all the way to the temple to get in there, and it was basically built for two of the pharaohs. It was Ramses II and Amenhotep the third. So they had what they call like their chambers there, and so this was the main chamber, which was they call the hypostyle halls for each one of them, like Ramses and the other guy.
Jim, we're going to have to take a little break
already?
here. Yeah, already.
Wow. Okay.
Okay, we're going to just take a short break, and we'll be right back.
Okay.
This is really interesting stuff.
Oh, without a doubt.
All right. All right, we're back, ladies and gentlemen, with Traveling Jim.
Okay.
And we interrupted you a couple of minutes ago, but tell us where you were at.
Okay,
here
we're at
point.
Karnak, and so Karnak here, and they have two obelisks. I mean, one is now in Paris, France. There's still one there, and there's one on the ground also. So
what's an obelisk?
Well, that's that straight pillar, almost like a Washington Monument. It's called an obelisk.
Okay.
And it was called carved in there, and they took one to Paris, and then, like I say, they still have one there, and there's one lying on the ground that was in a stage of, being the hieroglyphs and that. So yeah, that's what it is right now. Then we went. So that is one place one must see. I mean, it's so immense and so unbelievable. Then we went to Luxor, basically at night, and nice temple there. I'll just a couple of pictures we'll show in the video there. Luxor is another great temple, and you see two big statues of Ramses there. And you go on. Then we went to what we call a papyrus factory, how they made papyrus, and how they took the reed out of a perennial grass that was grown in the Nile River naturally. It grew 2 to 5 meters high, and they had this flour on top of it, but then they cut it real thin, and then laid them piece by piece, and then they put water, and they dried it out, and then they take it out and pressed it, and then continued on. And so this is how they made all these particular papyrus type of papers that you saw there. So very interesting how they made that. So you can buy some beautiful items there in the store there naturally. So then we went to the Valley of the Kings. Now this is another one thing. After the pyramids were built, they had to take these bodies because they were robbing the graves in the pyramids, so now they took in the Valley of the Kings. They had all these tombs there. We went to see 6 of them, or 5 of them. We saw basically Ramses III, the 6th and the 5th, and Ramses IV. And also King Tut's was there. He was actually...
When you say they have a tomb there, is that like a pyramid, or is that
no?
Just
they're actually in the mountain. They're actually just dig right into the mountainside.
Okay.
And there's a lot of them. There's probably 50, 60 tombs there. And
so
we saw those 4, and we saw King Tut's. It cost like $300 to go, to 300 pounds, and it was like you divided by 16, about $20, but it wasn't worth it.
Okay.
You saw more at the museum. Is the best thing to do.
Okay.
But the others are fantastic. I mean, you go down the walls, all the carvings and the etchings and such, all the way down like 200, 300 feet, both sides and all the way down. It's just incredible. I mean, they took all these people to do it. And then in this particular area here, this is where they found the King Tut tomb in 1922. And that was the only grave that wasn't robbed with all the goodies, because we saw that in Cranbrook Institute, saw a lot of replicas, but there's a lot of it in the museum there. So that's the significance about that. And then Queen Nefertari is also in the Queen part of the Valley of the Queens. And she's in 62, so she's actually the beautiful wife of Ramses II. So, and then if we continued on to a temple, what they call Hatshepsut. They were going to say, they're going to not pronounce that correctly, so it's Hatshepsut. And she reigned for 22 years. She came after, I think, her father, something like that. And she was a queen that basically didn't like war, and she did a lot of art, and then she built her temple there, which is kind of interesting. And then we went to an alabaster factory, saw alabaster is made, very expensive.
But the question is, women had a lot of power back then, it sounds like.
Somewhat, yeah. Both.
Did you have a queen and a king?
No, well, a lot of them were queen. You know, the king was the main ones, you know, because the only one, like I said on here, was this Hatshep. So she was the only one that I know of a woman that ruled for 22 years. The rest were all men. So, but they were regarded very highly with all of the pharaohs. They were very highly regarded, the women were. And they were beautiful women, to say the least. Then as we went from there, we saw 2 statues of Menon, which was kind of interesting, kind of on the outskirts of there. And then we saw the Valley of the Workmen, where they took the workmen who built or dug these tombs. They were actually the place that they worked off the side of the mountain there, where they lived, and came back and did all the work there. So it was really interesting there. So yeah, so with that, so there's 2 queens that are very interesting. Is Nefertari, who is the Ramses' wife and of Ramses II, and she was the beloved of Mut, called Meki en Mut. That was her Arabic name. And then you had Nefertiti, who was the most beautiful woman, the wife of Pharaoh Akhenaten, if that's pronounced correctly, okay.
All right.
So she was beautiful. There was no doubt about that.
Now, what year was this?
Hers was for somewhere Ramses II. I'm trying to remember, about 1300, 1400 BC, so somewhere in that neighborhood.
Quite a long time ago.
Because actually, so it was coming down there, okay. Then we went to what they call the Temple of Edfu. It was dedicated to the falcon god Horus, and he's in the death chamber because Horus was the one who led him from if he's a good guy, he goes to Isis and Osiris, who is his mother and dad. So he was the son of that one there. But again, very unbelievable temples there, and so much to see in there. And again, all these hieroglyphics and such. Then we went to Umbo, another temple, and this was called the crocodile place, where they had actually crocodiles. They're mummified because they were revered, the crocodiles.
Really?
Yeah, and so they had about 15 crocodiles in this museum that you could see there. It was along the Nile, and, so it was kind of an interesting place there to see. So both of those are very interesting to see, unbelievable. I mean, again,
what was the religion back at that point?
Did
they have a religion?
I don't know. It was. I think there was the Ra and the Ka, and I'm trying to remember what that was. I wrote it down, but I can't remember.
But it wasn't a Muslim religion.
No, whatsoever. Then we flew to Aswan from Cairo, and then from Aswan we flew to Abu Simbel, which is a place now that they had to recut because they put the dam in there. So the waters raised and made Lake Nasser. They had to raise it 270 feet or 90 meters because they had to recut it, and only the Swedish came up with the idea of how to do it. And they cut it completely, so now it's embedded in the side of the mountain, and they had to do some real interesting parts there. There's 4 statues of Ramses there, and he's sitting in with his hands on his lap there, and he's wearing the double crown. And if he wears the double crown, that means they are ruling both the upper and lower part of Egypt. Okay. So if he has a double hat, that means he's ruling both of them. So with that, then his wife is in the next one here. She had I'll get it right here. Nefertari, she's in the other one, and she's got some beautiful pictures of her on the wall that's carved in here. And between his legs is a lot of his family members, sons and daughters and members of the family. So again, and you have to see, you have to go by air only. You can go by bus now, but it takes us 6 or 7 hours. So the roads aren't that great, but it's getting better. Then we went for a boat ride on what they call these Felucia, and we went for about an hour and a half, and they go, all by sail and things of that nature there. So moving on, so we saw day 9, went to the island, or the Temple of Philae, which is Philae. And again, once again, there was 19 temples that were in the lower part of the Nile, so only in August that they could take all these particular stones and reconstruct it on the island. It's one of the smallest islands, and it's a beautiful island. It's called the Pearl of Egypt. And so their other 18 are now buried underwater. Will never be seen again, just like the one in Nassau. Same thing, the lake has covered a lot of these things you'll never see again. Again, it's beautiful grounds. The architecture is fantastic. I mean, then, like I said, we went to the Aswan Dam, and it has 12 turbines. And without the Aswan Dam, Egypt wouldn't exist, basically, because there'd be nothing to grow, because they only had like 4% of the land is basically fertile. The other 90% is desert. So they had to, Nile was their lifeblood there.
Let me ask you a question, though.
Yeah.
We had this thing with the, I think they call it the Arab Spring, back a couple, 3-4 years ago.
3 or 4 years, yeah.
Did you get any kind of pushback at all about being an American citizen over there?
No, we did not. We had no problem. They're very friendly. In fact, our tour guide says, be careful. They call them mosquitoes, because they're on there like mosquitoes. They want to sell you all this stuff here.
Of course.
Oh, man, unbelievable. They'll sell you real cheap. You got to art negotiate like heck. No, they're not. In fact, what happened is we had a police car. I always followed our bus, and we had a security guard with us.
Oh.
And he had a gun. So I mean, but I don't know if it was mandatory, but they had it. It was good.
Yeah.
I mean, you didn't even know they were there, and you saw hardly any police at all there. So within on this island of Philo, which is dedicated to the goddess Isis. So I mean, she's got her temple here, which again is very unbelievable. It's incredible, these stuff here.
You say Isis?
Isis, yeah, Isis and Osiris. I mean, that's the husband and wife. So they were the two. So this whole island is for her only.
So that ISIS has certainly a different connotation today.
Oh, it does? What is that? I don't even.
The ISIS?
Yeah.
ISIS?
Oh, I'm sorry. Well, I don't know if it's the same. It's ISIS. I don't know if it's the same thing. Yeah,
same thing.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
We went to a perfume shop, and they showed all these aromatic things that you could use for, if you get blindness or, all kind of headaches and all that stuff. And very interesting. The stuff was pretty expensive, about $45 for 1.5. No. 45 for 1.5 ounce. You buy 30 for $70. You got 3 ounces or 100 milliliters, and the stuff is fantastic. I bought 2. We bought orange blossom and rose. It was fantastic. I mean,
so what does this do for you?
Well, it's medicinal. It's they call it. I'm not sure what they call this. Like, here it is. It's called aromatherapy.
Makes you smell good.
Smell good, and it's also for different things. You got for eucalyptus and sandalwood. They have all these different scents, and they produce, and the stuff is pretty good, and smells very good too. So, yes, essence of oil they call it. So it's pretty neat there. Then, as we went back to Cairo, we flew back to Cairo, and we went to what we call the Coptic Museum in Cairo. This is the Christian one, and it's supposed to be called the Hanging Church. And so I went there, and we saw a couple wall things. They had Mary and Joseph and Jesus that came there, and I suppose they spent 3 months there. So I asked our Father Joe, and he says, well, it may be possibly a story. We don't for sure. But they showed the whole trip. They came over there and all that. Who do I disagree with that? I don't know. I mean, it was pretty good.
Could have happened.
Could have happened. It could have happened. And
but they had to walk a long ways to get there.
Yeah, that's why I say that's a long way to walk from where they were at, say in Nazareth, all the way to Egypt. Although they did say in the Bible they weren't to Egypt, but how far they went, who knows? Then naturally,
don't you have to take a boat to get there?
Well, part of it wasn't they could go through the Sinai Peninsula and all that.
Right.
Yeah, so they had to cross the over the Suez Canal and that. So they had kind of little boats there. Then actually from that church, a short distance was the Nile River, where Moses was supposed to be hidden in the reeds there before, during his time there.
Right.
So it was pretty good there. So, but just to say, here's some kind of things here. The money that they have here for Egypt, they have no coins. Now they have 2 coins, but they're worth nothing. The half shilling and the shilling, there's 2 of them only, but it's all paper money today. It's all from the 5, the 10, the 20, the 50, 100, 200. So this particular 5 was worth about the 31 cents, and the 10 is worth 61 cents. The 50 is worth about $3.
Okay.
So you have to be real careful of your money. The books that they had were fantastic. I mean, all these books were to really understand Egypt. And I got a book on Egypt, Luxor, and Abu Simbel, and it shows all the pyramids, all the kings and queens and everything else. These bags here you can buy like 2 for $5. You had to negotiate like that. Well, I mean, they charge you 10. They said no, and you get it down to 2 for $5. These purses here, 10 for $5. I mean, nice little purses here.
Yeah, not bad.
And basically, the neat thing about this, these two things are very wonderful to have. This shows the whole history of Egypt here, with all the tombs where they're at on the Nile River. It stretched from Cairo all the way to Aswan near the Sudan border there. It shows all where all the temples are and all the people there. And so it's kind of a quick check for understanding what everything's out there, okay?
Yeah, that looks great.
And then we have, this is the dynasty going back 5,000 years ago. It goes all the way through every king. How they chronologically did this, I have no idea, but it's all here from going back to 5,000 BC all the way to the Arabs that basically ruled today. Went through the Greek and Roman Empire, the Byzantium Empire. So they have all these dynasties and such that we have in this particular life of Egypt there and the civilization there. It's just an incredible place to visit. I like to say, I would use that number one, and I got to really thank my partner Samantha for going with me, because I wanted to go there and we finally were able to make it.
Finally did it, huh?
Yeah, finally did it. And I would recommend to anybody, do this first, because there's so much to do, so much
So
to
out
see.
of this whole trip, what kind of sticks in your mind the most?
Oh,
what's
my
the
goodness.
biggest
The best thing?
best thing that you
Wow.
saw out of this whole trip?
To think about that, I would have to go to the Karnak Temple. There was so much there, and the
Really?
immenseness of this thing with the obelisk and these colonnades or pylons and such. In fact, at one time, it was 2/3 covered in sand. And the reason they could determine that, because when the French came, they were actually engraving near about almost 3/4 of the way up. They were engraving it. So why was it the bottom? Well, it was buried, and a lot of these pyramids were buried. And a lot of these particular temples were buried
in the sand.
in the sand.
Yeah,
Yeah,
really.
because of the shifting sand. Again, once
Right.
again,
Right.
the Egypt is 90% desert, so it just was
Okay.
shifting. It's always finding things, and it's just again the civilizations. I mean, what they did and the size of the pyramids. I mean, you look at the size of them compared to all the other ones. The three in Egypt and Cairo are the biggest. And yeah, I would say I would go. Karnak was great. And then Abu Simbel is another one. It's fantastic how they took it from the submerged part of the lake, would have been underwater, and to move it to 270 feet up on this cliff.
Right.
And because the rock was actually not solid there, they had to drill holes in there and impregnate it with stuff so it would hold them out when they put the whole facing on there. So it was fantastic.
Well, Jim, this has been a terrific education.
Well, there's so much. I mean, I just probably touched the tip of the iceberg that we saw here, unfortunately.
You went through a lot here in 30 minutes.
In 30 minutes, yeah. So, but again, I mean,
I want to absolutely thank you for doing this and being on our show again. And when's your next trip?
Well, we're going to Sri Lanka in March.
Oh, my God.
And then we're going to go to Georgia and Armenia and Russia in next September. So we already have the next two already lined up.
Well, we'll be waiting to interview when you get back.
We will do that. Thank you, George.
All right. Thanks for joining us. And we'll see you the next time.